My new boyfriend never ate in front of me, and when I finally found out why, I wished I'd never asked. I met Adrian at a bookstore. He was funny, calm, and somehow remembered every little detail I told him. Within a few weeks, we were seeing each other almost every day. There was just one thing that never made sense. He never ate. Our first date was at an Italian restaurant. He smiled, told me he'd already eaten, and watched me finish my meal while we talked for 2 hours. The second date was the same. Then the third. Whenever I suggested grabbing breakfast, he'd say he wasn't hungry. Coffee shops were easy because he'd order black coffee, but if I invited him to dinner, he'd always find an excuse. At first I thought he had an eating disorder or maybe a medical condition. I never wanted to embarrass him, so I stopped asking. Then one evening I showed up at his apartment without warning because I wanted to surprise him with dessert for his birthday. The lights were off. His front door was slightly open. I called his name but didn't hear an answer, so I stepped inside. That's when I heard voices coming from the basement. Curious, I walked down the stairs as quietly as I could. The room was lit by dozens of candles. Adrian wasn't alone. 5 people dressed in black were standing in a circle around a long wooden table. On the table sat several glasses, filled with a dark red liquid. Adrian picked one up, looked straight toward the staircase, and smiled as if he'd known I was there the entire time. I froze. Nobody in the room looked surprised to see me. Adrian slowly walked over and closed the distance between us. "I was hoping you wouldn't find out like this," he said. Before I could say anything, he picked up one of the glasses and held it under the light. "It isn't wine." I honestly thought he was joking. Then he explained everything. The people in the room weren't part of some strange club. They were vampires. Not the movie version that turned into bats or burst into flames, but a hidden community that had lived quietly among ordinary people for generations. They avoided attention, stayed away from violence, and survived on donated blood supplied through illegal black market networks. That's why he'd never eaten in front of me. Human food made him sick. Blood was the only thing his body could process. He admitted he'd wanted to tell me weeks earlier, but every time he tried, he convinced himself I'd think he was crazy. I asked him one question. "Have you ever wanted to hurt me?" He looked genuinely offended. "Never." Then he rolled up his sleeve and showed me a bracelet made from old silver. It wasn't jewelry. It was a promise every member of their group wore, a reminder that feeding on people was forbidden. I left his apartment that night with more questions than answers. We never dated again. A month later, I moved to another part of the city and tried to convince myself the whole thing had been some elaborate prank. Then one evening, I walked past a cafe. Through the window, I saw Adrian. He was smiling at another woman across the table. There wasn't a single plate of food between them.